Hello, friends. Before we get started into this week's episode, I just want to remind you that next week, Monday, July 22nd, our summer boot camp is kicking off. We have 5 days, 5 amazing content jam-packed days. We have over $4,000 worth of awesome giveaways. You can unlock some of our courses just by doing the homework. You can win a temp drop. You can win a full scholarship to come and work with me inside Fertility Confidence Method. But on top of that, what you're also going to get out of bootcamp is the beginning stages of your fertility care plan that's backed by the science and made for you and your body, because we are going to go through the motions together to build out this plan. How you do that is through our daily homework sessions. By doing the homework is how you get entered in to win the giveaways. It's a win-win-win, in my opinion. 5 days, so much. We're talking cycle tracking, we're talking egg quality, we're talking inflammation, we're talking autoimmunity, we're talking microbiome, we're talking mindset. There's one more thing. That's not hormones. We're talking hormones. I absolutely love running boot camp. I highly encourage you to come and check it out. We start next Monday, July 22nd, and you can register at ttc.kelseyduncan.com/bootcamp. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence podcast. I have another 2-part interview for you today, and I'm telling you, I actually made this guest unfortunately late for a meeting because we just kept talking, and I was like, I don't want to end this interview. I have so much more to ask and so much more to talk about. So we split it into 2 for you guys for some easy listening and easy consumption. But even this first part is so jam-packed with information. I'm just really, really excited to share it with you. So I got to sit down with Dr. Cleopatra, and she's the founder and chief scientific officer of the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute and Superbaby Nutraceuticals. She has a world-renowned Primemester Protocol, which you're going to hear us talk a little bit more about in this episode, that is based on cutting-edge science, deep human connection, and we had a beautiful conversation around genetics, genetic expression, epigenetics, and how that actually plays a fairly significant role in the fertility journey. And listening to her share her story and also just some of her clinical experience was so, so beautiful. Dr. Cleopatra and what she does with the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute and Superbaby Nutraceuticals has helped so many women all over the globe make what she calls super babies, which is super cute if you ask me. So today specifically, like I said, jam-packed episode. We went on and on and on. And actually at the end, so I highly recommend listening to this one all the way through, I share a little bit about my personal journey with social media and taking a step back and helping my clients to kind of understand, about comparison in the fertility space. And so if that's something that you feel like you're dealing with, Dr. Cleopatra and I have a really beautiful conversation around how us ourselves as fertility practitioners still feel and live, can get caught, right, in that vortex, in that space of comparison syndrome, of feeling like maybe we're not doing enough, or not doing the right things, or like we're contributing to the noise and the junk on the internet, but then we are also entrepreneurs. It's a really fascinating snippet that I highly recommend. That still, is valuable to your journey, but is really her and I kind of unloading, I feel, a little bit of baggage that we have working in this niche and in this space. Because let me tell you, it's not always sunshines and rainbows and positive pregnancy tests. It's challenging. And so we had a really good back and forth, and it was nice for me to kind of hear she has a larger audience than I do, has done a lot of really, really impressive work, and has so many certifications and all these things. I was just in awe, and she has some of the same feelings that I do. And it's just such a reminder that we don't always understand what other people are going through. And social media is definitely just like a very big highlight reel, right? So that's the end. What do we talk about in the beginning? We're going to talk about genetic expression and how epigenetics can really be playing a large role in your fertility journey, but also how to prime your body, how to actually influence that epigenetic piece and that genetic expression to improve your chances of conceiving. And there's one of the reasons we got into the topic of social media is there's some really interesting pieces that Dr. Cleopatra brought up in terms of how to support your body with this, how to prime your body for this, that I didn't even really myself consider or think of or talk about in the same way. So I found that very fascinating. We talked about how genetic expression actually influences the health of our babies and our kiddos. So it's not just about you right now getting pregnant, but also making sure that we are having the healthiest pregnancies that we can and that we are leading our babies to having big, beautiful, successful, healthy lives. Ways to influence those genes in a very proactive way instead of having a very reactive medical approach to fertility. And then, like I said, my social media hiatus and what I tell my clients about comparison syndrome. And this is just part one. Okay, next week I'm going to give you guys part two, where we actually talk about more around age and how age and Dr. Cleopatra's impact or influence of how she thinks in age influences. And it's really fascinating. You guys are going to love it. So you can find out more about Dr. Cleopatra over on her Instagram, which is Dr. Docter, so full spelling _Cleopatra. And check out the website, fertilitypregnancy.org/consult if you want some immediate support. And fertilitypregnancy.org, there's resources, tools, you can read more about what they're doing over there. Find her supplement company, Superbaby Nutraceuticals, and get to know her a little bit better. I highly recommend it. So enjoy this first snippet of my conversation with the amazing Dr. Cleopatra, and I will see you next week for part two. Hello, Dr. Cleopatra. Welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. I'm so excited to finally get to sit down with you.
Dr. Kelsey, it's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd love to start with you just sharing a little bit about you, a little background information, and then I have some really exciting questions that I know our listeners are going to just be dying to hear the information on.
I can't wait to have your questions. And honestly, nothing is off limits. We can be as raw and real and tactical as we need to be to make sure that every person taking the time to listen to this gets exactly what they need. And that's really my only agenda and intention for our conversation today. So That's perfect. So I have a really long list of amazing training and credentials and have been doing this work in fertility and pregnancy and the intergenerational transmission of health, how health is transmitted from one generation to the next for almost 3 decades, 28 years to be exact. And I think that all of those things are amazing about me, but I think what's most amazing is just my sheer and utter obsession and devotion with this area and this arena of life. And I lost my mother at birth, and my beautiful mother was only 27 years old. So, I'm turning 46 in a couple of days, and it's really shocking to me to think that I've outlived my mother by almost 2 decades already. And I feel like my life is just beginning. And that was obviously a really difficult and rocky start to life. And by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I was so clear that the most important thing in life is reproduction, because it determines everything else that comes after it.
Right.
And I call it an intergenerational domino. It's this profound ripple effect. And we see a lot of trends where this ripple is moving in a negative direction. And that's been going on for a long time, but it's speeding up and it's getting worse and worse. And when I started this work in 1996 at 18 years and 2 months old, when I went into a pregnancy laboratory, I was so ahead of my time in thinking about this. Nobody was talking about this. Nobody was thinking about this. And I'm so happy to see that it's gaining more attention. And it's just really the sheer and utter devotion that that have driven me since I was a little girl, and really making my way through really heavy darkness, finding how do I even survive in this world, let alone thrive, and then believe that my life serves a purpose of helping other women and families to thrive. And I would just say that devotion is the thing that made me being here today, having accomplished and done what I've done. And now we have thousands of super babies in the world on 6 continents in over 45 countries. So I feel of all the things I've accomplished, my super babies and the super babies that we've helped to shepherd and usher into the world are really my greatest accomplishment in life. In addition to my love with my magical hubby, as I call him, because obviously for our family, that's the source of our super babies. I really think that it's that devotion that allowed me to withstand all the things that I needed to withstand to get here, and to be resilient and to have faith and keep moving forward, even with the tremendous odds and obstacles that I was facing. And I think a lot of women who are struggling with fertility, struggling to get pregnant, stay pregnant, have had children with health problems and are afraid to have another child, whatever it is, worried that they're running out of time on their biological clock with their eggs, feel like they're facing insurmountable odds. And I think that this conversation is really one of resilience, and of knowing that even when you face incredible and incredibly difficult odds, they are not insurmountable, but it requires not stopping, not giving up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your incredibly powerful story. And I love how it sort of alludes to this concept of genes and epigenetics. And it's this whole sort of, I was reading through your website this morning and learning about super babies that you call them. And I just love this concept because it's also something as a fertility practitioner that I haven't ventured fully into. I mean, I have in ways in terms of how I work, but haven't like enveloped that whole concept. So how much does genetics do you believe plays a role in all of this?
Well, so let me just back up and say that as a fertility practitioner, you're doing most of the things that you're doing and advising your clients and students and patients to do are affecting their epigenetics and their genetic expression. However, I'm the first person to have applied the field to epigenetics directly to fertility and pregnancy in this way. So it's very rare that you find this information out there. And yet we have these different lines of scientific evidence that if you're somebody who can see connections among worlds and fields that look like they're not connected, which is really my zone of genius and has been my entire existence, that's when you can see just how critical our epigenetics is for determining our biological age and our aging trajectories. And that's really the foundation of preserving our fertility and having strong, robust, super fertility at every age, because we're seeing fertility declining faster in younger ages than in older ages, older in quotes, even. And that's because human beings are experiencing this accelerated wear and tear and aging from the different types of stressors that we face in the modern world, that our psychophysiology, our HPA axis, our hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis, our body stress response, the broader central nervous system doesn't know how to cope with.
Right.
And so this is fundamentally a question of how do we ensure that we stay as youthful as possible biologically for as long as possible. And if it looks like we're too far gone in terms of our chronological age, how can we reverse? It's almost like the Benjamin Button, like, aging in reverse, but really our epigenome is the lever. It's the key to that. So when you ask the question, how much does our genetics play a role? So the interesting thing is that almost everything that we experience in life has a heredity component, but the epigenetic contribution is far greater than the genetic contribution. So the epigenetic contribution, or epigenetics, is about how our genes are expressing themselves. So we all are born with genetic risks and vulnerabilities and genetic strengths and privileges. And the choices that we make on a moment to moment basis, including the thoughts that we engage in, the emotion that we are expressing and feeling, and a whole host of other things, are determining just how much we're dialing those strengths and privileges up or down, and the vulnerabilities up or down. So when we take an epigenetic approach to our fertility and to having healthy pregnancies and to making our super babies, it's just a focus on dialing up our genetic strengths and privileges, and dialing down our genetic vulnerabilities. And so much of what we encounter on a day-to-day basis is really dialing up our vulnerabilities. And that's when we're seeing all of these problems, including higher rates of weak fertility, subfertility, and fertility challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the really cool thing about what we do, what fertility practitioners in general have the capability of doing that we don't get to talk about all that much, is we're not just influencing your health to get you pregnant, but we're also influencing the health of your children and your children's children. There's this whole downward lineage of what your health really is doing. And in the moment, we're thinking about the prize, right? We're thinking about the pregnancy. We're not even really there yet, but we get to sit back and go, think of all of the influence we're having in future generations, which is amazing.
100%. And I always say that primestering, which is our way of priming the body down to the cells and DNA for having our best fertility, having our healthiest pregnancies, and making our super babies, primestering is the highest form of activism on the planet, because you are influencing and touching the state and soul of the planet for generations to come by engaging in this set of activities. So, like you said, a mama is focused on, I want the pregnancy, I want the baby. And of course that's so important. I mean, that's the outcome that we're here to, like you said, that's the prize. That's the outcome that we're here to help deliver, to facilitate. And yet it's so much bigger than that. And I think that the thing to remember is that almost 1 out of every 2 children has a chronic mental or physical health condition today. That's really alarming. That means for the average family having 2 children in many countries, not all countries, because that's declining, right? That means the average family having 2 children can expect one of them to be sick. That is a terrifying thought and proposition. And yet it is our reality today in the United States of America and in much of the world, and especially the Western world. And so although the people listening to us right now and coming to my website or your website are people who are struggling and searching for a solution to be able to have a baby, we need everybody to come and do this work. We need everybody to come and primester or do the preparation, the guided preparation, because that gives us the very best odds of intercepting this terrible path, this runaway train that we're on. And this is only expected to get worse and worse. I mean, if you just think about autism as an example, the most recent statistics are that 1 out of 36 children today is autistic. And that number is so high for boys. I believe it's 1 out of every 25 boys. And it might be even higher than that now. And this is becoming the norm. And yet this is just because something is becoming the norm does not mean it's normal. And of course, if you have an autistic child, you're going to love your child. We mamas and parents love our children no matter what. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge it's often a very hard life for them. And it's often a very hard life for the parents. And so my feeling is always that we not only want to get to that baby, but we want that baby to be as well as possible so that they have the best chance at having the beautiful life that they deserve. And you, as the mama, dad, parent of all and any gender, has the best odds of getting to have the beautiful experience of parenting that you deserve, because taking care of a child that is not well is really, really tough. I mean, there's a body of research on this that shows that the stress markers, psychophysiological stress markers, inflammatory markers, IL-6, cortisol, other cytokines are off the charts for women who are caring for children with special needs. So this is a really hard thing. And like I said, it's not becoming rare that children have special needs. Almost 1 out of 2 children today has special needs. So that means that even people who are not concerned about their fertility really want to be so much more thoughtful and intentional about priming for a healthy pregnancy and for having a healthy child, so that they get to have this beautiful experience of life. We just got a new Superbaby arrival announcement, and the mama wrote me and she said, we just want to thank you. We've never felt better or more grounded, and we just pray that the work we did puts us in the situation that you're in with your 3 super babies, which is, how big do they get to dream? How big of a life do they get to have? And that was so beautiful to me, and really, I'm about to cry. Really, one of the most important and best compliments you could ever get, right? And we all deserve that experience.
Right. Yeah. I think we talk about all the time how our clients come to find us when they're already struggling. And if we could just get the message out that even when you don't want a baby, even when you are trying to avoid pregnancy, there are still things that we should be considering and absolutely learning, because our educational system and our healthcare system is not setting us up for success as women to understand our bodies and our hormones and what our decisions can make impact in long term. But it's just not something that we've been taught to consider. It's more about how do we turn that part of our body off for the majority of our teens and 20s until we're ready, and all of a sudden we expect to be able to just flip a switch and turn it on and everything's going to be hunky-dory. And obviously people who come and work with us are learning that that's not the case. But there's a whole subset of couples in that conversation that maybe aren't going to go on to have struggles to conceive, but still need the more aggressive preconception care that you're essentially alluding to, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I will use myself as an example. So I have 3 super babies, and I had all of them in my late 30s and 40s. And I am, by far the oldest mom always. And by the way, my husband is in his 50s. And so he's even more, I'm about 10 years older than the moms, or, 15, but he's more like 15 or 20 years older than the dads. And we had no expectation of fertility challenges, but you better believe I was primestering just as intentionally as I have been teaching the couple struggling for the past 3 decades, because I want my super babies, and I can't think of anything that's more important to invest your time, energy, and money and other resources in. And I think that, I'll think of the couples where the dad, they're not struggling, and the mom learns about what we do and she's like, I want my super baby. And then the dad comes in, well, like, can't we just have sex and get pregnant? Like, the old fashioned way, like what everybody does, right? And I'm like, you totally can do that. Except I don't think you want the outcomes that everybody else is having, because what's happening on average, what the normal curve looks like now, is really alarming. Like I said, I mean, we talked about the example of autism, and just to put it in context, autism is shown in the scientific data to be only 35% genetic and 65% epigenetic. So that means we don't have 100% power to control and power to prevent it, but we have a whole lot of power to exercise strategies for prevention, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that are listening that are really loving this more proactive approach, which is so perfect, because I was actually writing some content this morning and I really went on this riff about how healthcare right now has become a very reactive place, and we need to be more proactive, and that there is this whole other option that you can seek out that is more proactive. And that's exactly what this whole conversation is about being proactive with not just, we could say health in general and your longevity, but also with your fertility and with your ability to control genetic expression when it comes to the children that you are trying and hopefully having as well. So I think the proactive piece is so important. So for someone who is like wanting to be proactive, is ready to really make sure that they're doing the right things, when you're talking about gene expression, what are some aspects of lifestyle that they maybe need to be considering a little bit more?
So this is a great question, and I like to think about it as inputting information.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about inputting information, it's the things that you are being exposed to internally and externally with the greatest frequency or magnitude. So, for example, your thoughts and broader psychological hygiene, actually, that's the number one epigenetic input, because you can't get away from them. You're constantly being exposed to them. Then you want to think about sleep or lack thereof. You want to think about, unfortunately, screens, because that's become such a big part of life. And there's a lot wrapped into that. So there's light pollution and exposure and the disruption of the circadian rhythm, but there's also the content that you're engaging with and how it's affecting your stress response, whether you're in your parasympathetic or your sympathetic, whether it's you're engaging in social comparison and it's making you feel like you're less than, whether it's increasing your feelings of aloneness and loneliness and isolation because you're not actually engaging with people in real life and the people right in front of you. So there's a whole lot wrapped up in screens. Then we want to be thinking about nutrients, both in the form of, what we're taking in, food, drink, but also supplementation. So those are really some of the top epigenetic inputs. But in general, it's, what you think, what you consume, how you're interacting with the world around you, your relationships with other beings, other animals, as well as your relationship with time and with nature and the seasons. So that's just kind of a big picture.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up, because I'm actually on a bit of a social media hiatus
Nice.
myself.
Love it.
Because I got to a point like a few weeks ago where I was like, this is just not serving my mental health right now. We'd
Mm-hmm.
had some tough losses in my community that was really
sorry.
weighing on me. And
Yeah.
so, like, continuously seeing fertility, anything good or bad, in my social media, because obviously I'm following lots of other fertility accounts, whether it's people who are actively trying to get pregnant or other practitioners. And finally, I was like, every time I open my phone, I'm immediately being triggered. And I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously this has been happening forever, but it was the first time that I really was like, this is a huge negative for how I'm feeling. And I coach my clients all the time of like, in the fertility space, especially, it's such a blessing that more and more women are openly sharing about their fertility experiences. And it allows for us to build this wonderful community that I think is so crucial from a treatment perspective, to not feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the like flip side of that is it's really easy to fall into comparison or imposter syndrome. I have some clients that are like in my program saying, I don't know if I'm in the right spot. Like, some of these women are having harder journeys than I am. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, we don't compare to other people. Like, that you are in your journey, and we're going to meet you where you're at, and we're going to meet them where they're at. And there is no comparison. So I find that a lot of fertility couples struggle with seeing what other people are doing, and am I doing enough, am I doing too much, like, oh, it worked for them, is that going to work for me? And so social media becomes this like beautiful ability to build community, but also this negative spiral of you potentially feeling almost inadequate on your fertility journey. So I think it's really interesting that like the concepts of what you're consuming, and therefore the thoughts that are being triggered, is also playing a role in terms of the genetic components of all the good you're trying to do at home and in real life, basically.
100%. If you think about it, every exposure and experience we have has a biochemical underpinning, and that biochemical underpinning sets off a cascade that affects our genetic expression, our biological age, which directly affects egg quality, sperm quality, insulin sensitivity versus resistance, blood sugar regulation. I mean, I think it's really easy for people to downplay the role of psychology
Mm-hmm.
and emotional well-being, and related to that, the expression of negative versus positive emotion and personality traits that lean toward positive and negative emotion. It's easy for those things to get left out of the fertility discussion, and yet they are the most critical things because they directly affect all of the kind of hard physical pathways that you're trying to improve and address. And I think that that's really that is why the Primemester Protocol is so successful, because it's front and center. And we see
Mm-hmm.
across the board that the key is always there. It doesn't matter what someone's presenting with. It doesn't matter if AMH is basically zero. It doesn't matter if sperm quality is really low. It doesn't matter if someone has PCOS, has massive autoimmune challenges, whatever it may be. The key to unlocking fertility, a true, sincere fertility breakthrough, is always at what we call the psychosexual level of the fertility and pregnancy pyramid, which is kind of what we use for shorthand for this complex network or system that makes up our fertility and our pregnancy potential, and then the what we're passing down to the future generations. And it's really overlooked in the broader fertility discourse. And if you think about it, in IVF clinics, etc., OBGYN offices, these things are not being looked at all, or they're, they might say manage your stress, but then it's
Right.
like, well, what does that mean? And what do you do with it? And what if you're somebody who's prone to worrying, and you're somebody who is a type A personality, who is, always feeling like time pressured and has a tendency toward hostility and being critical. And actually, this is really common among high achieving women.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really common among women who are struggling with fertility and pregnancy and having healthy children. And that's not pointing fingers or placing blame, because these women, we women who are achieving a tremendous amount and contributing to the world, have had to adopt more masculine qualities in order to survive in the worlds in which we operate,
Mm-hmm.
and to be successful in those worlds. And so if you look at the culture, the dominant culture of American society, Western society, and really most of the world, not all of the world, what you see is a push toward having these more type A personality characteristics, but they have a direct detrimental effect on fertility, on ovarian reserve, AMH levels, egg quality, hormonal balance, the mother of fertility, which is our digestion, our microbiome, the immune system, the brain, the communication between the brain and the body. I mean, the list, which directly impact our biological age and that weathering that I talked about, and then our genetic expression. So we don't talk about this enough.
Right.
And even when it's talked about, nobody knows what the hell to do about it. Right. And that is so very important, that we start to have real conversations about, what does this look like? What does it look like to go from being a habitual worrier and always hyper vigilant, waiting for what's wrong and planning for what's wrong, to being in greater harmony with my life and myself and the people who are with me already, as I'm waiting for the people who will complete our family, right? And I think that this is really our zone of genius, and why we've been able to make such an impact. And it's because of the kind of the combination of training that I have, that we are able to do this, and we can train other people in doing it so that it spreads. And I think that this is what we need. We need a shift in the cultural conversation, and we need it to spread. Like you said, we need to be talking to our children about it before they go through puberty, before they're even interested in thinking about having children. And I hope that as more and more people like you, like me, like the people we're training, the other practitioners we're training, doctors, medical students, because now some of our curriculum is in medical schools, which is incredible, that this will spread and that this will change. But speaking to your point of, I actually don't follow many fertility people. And because, fertility is my topic, and pregnancy, I get a lot of fertility ads.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so overwhelming.
Very.
And I think about how I put myself in the shoes of the women and couples and families I serve, and I'm like, imagine how overwhelming this is for them. And it's really left me thinking, what's the answer? How can I serve, can FPI, the Fertility and Pregnancy Institute, Superbaby Nutraceuticals, how can we serve without being part of the problem? Because if we run ads also, right? Yeah. I mean, we were word of mouth for the first 23 years, but we served on a very small scale. Mm-hmm. Now we serve on a much, much, much bigger scale, but our business is still primarily referral based, but we run ads too. If we don't run ads, if we don't post on social, no one will know we exist. In fact, not enough people know we exist. Yeah. And that's a problem in and of itself, because people aren't aware of the of the fact that there are other options. There are other types of solutions out there, or complementary ones. Like, you've got a Primemester before you go into IVF. You've got to. Your raw material is your responsibility. IVF can't do anything about that, right? So not enough people know. If we don't run the ads, put the information out there, they won't know. And yet, when I see that, I'm sick, and I'm like, I don't want to be part of this problem, yet I don't know the answer. I can see, I actually have a list of like everything that's wrong with the fertility services and supplement industry and the prenatal vitamin industry. I have a list. And I keep asking, every day I look at the list and I'm like, how can I be an answer to this problem, a solution to this problem? And I don't know the answers, but I know I'm working on a lot of answers in the background. But it is a massive problem.
Oh, 100%. I have all of these thoughts all of the time. And I think for anyone listening, I hope from this part of the conversation, take away from the fact that like, we get it when you feel inundated over and over and over with information and this person saying their way's the best. No, my way's the best. No, this is the best. You have to do this or it's never going to work. Like, know that us also as fertility practitioners find it overwhelming as well. And it is really challenging to get the message out there to let people know like there are other options, there are proactive options. The conveyor belt that you get put on once you acknowledge that you're not getting pregnant through the mainstream medical model like is not the only option, and there are a lot of complementary things that we want to do whilst going through that process and before. But you're not wrong. The only way to spread the word is to be a part of that journey. And so I feel you. It is such, especially right now. And like, I have the same thought all the time. Like, how do I keep doing what I'm doing, but not contribute to the tornado that is the fertility space right now? And I've really just come to the conclusion that like, all we can do is be ourselves and be of service. And at the end of the day, like that is the best energy to put out into the world, really, so that the people searching for our service can find us, right?
Absolutely. I agree with that. And it's really interesting because the other people they're hearing from have many IVF clinics today, a certain percentage, I don't know if I'll get the number right off the top of my head. It could be a third, 2/3 are owned by venture capital firms. Right. So this is a completely different type of relationship. And these are companies that have $100 million marketing budgets, right? I have bootstrapped my company every step of the way and used all the profits to further grow and further reach, right? So we are in a space where the presence of those with power is so enormous and the voice is so enormous, and we're like this little squeak. It doesn't matter that I am a retired tenured USC professor and have published dozens of articles and had $3 million in grant funding from the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation, and that what I do has as much or more scientific data behind it and an even better success rate. It doesn't matter because the power that I yield is so much smaller. Right. And so I agree with what you're saying, which is that what we get to do is just keep being devoted, keep showing up, and keep serving the people who need us. And, I think that there are some things that are unique about the fertility space. I have my list, right, that I talked about. But I also think that this is really a problem of the modern world and the double-edged sword of access to information and interconnectedness, but access to people's highlight reels, right? So you can think, how you gave the example of your clients who are like, am I doing this enough? Am I doing this right? Well, we're entrepreneurs. So if you think about the entrepreneurial space, it's the same exact thing.
100%.
If you think about the fitness, probably if the fitness space, it's the same thing. I'm raising 2 boys and a girl, and the 2 boys are on the path to becoming pro footballers, soccer players in Europe. And we as parents, my husband and I, could be going through the same thing, although we are, I don't know, maybe that's where I need to look for the answers, because I'm like, we are so not influenced by the outside world in this. We are so locked in, dialed in, like, you know, we've got this. We will, everything, we figure it out. We look for the resources. So maybe there's something there, but I do think that in every space, there's this same problem. It's just that we're hyper aware of this problem in the fertility space because it's the domain in which we work. And we feel deeply for the people we're walking with every single day. I always say your super babies are for sure the answer to your prayers, but they're actually the answer to my prayers too. Yeah. I might not be as excited as you are, but I'm like number 2 because I'm so over the moon excited. So yes.
It's so true.